from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O-Neil.
Welcome to this week's edition of the CFL This Week. Of course, your weekly program where we break down and look forward to the happenings in the Canadian Football League. And I just don't do it alone, folks. I bring in three of the best from around the nation, and we've got one city cornered, but there's really nothing to talk about in the city of Winnipeg. So let's start off with Rookie Alert for the first time joining us on the CFL This Week. It's Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Thanks for joining us there.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really excited. I've been thinking about this over the weekend, and I'm glad to see. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I'm glad to see a fellow Winnipegger, as you mentioned, Huss here too. I don't know if he's been on before, but as far as the first time goes, awesome setup so far, even with Cauz as well.
Well, let's hope that he doesn't have the sophomore jinx, but we'll bring in the hustler. He is the hustler from Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Thanks for joining us there, hustler.
Hey, Clint, pleasure to be here. Great to share some time with Hammer, and of course, talk to you and Matt about everything going on in the Canadian Football League. Yeah, as you mentioned, not a lot of drama here in the PEG as far as what's going forward. We're getting ready for the 5th of December, but still a lot of interesting storylines around the Canadian Football League as we get into these final 3 weeks of the regular season.
Well, it does look like you might be coming to making a book in your trip to Hamilton, so keep it up. You guys look good out there in Bomberland. And he's the only man that can distinguish what is a Pinot Noir and a Cab Sauv. He is the sportsman that can talk about wine like no one in the world. I won't even go in the country like anyone in the world. Of course, from TSN 1050, Mr. Matthew Cauz. Thanks for joining us, Matty.
Bubba, always great. Remember, Pinot Noir, more of a thin-skinned, great varietal. Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be more full-bust, robust. Think Bordeaux versus Burgundy.
So what do I want to drink tonight is what I want to ask.
It's getting colder. Get the Cabernet Sauvignon. It's getting colder. You're shifting away from Pinot onto the bigger, meatier wines. Take the Cab.
You heard it here first, folks. Guys, let's talk some football here. Just yet another week of the Canadian Football League. And as we talked about earlier, I think in a couple of shows ago, it appeared to us that the crossover was not going to happen this year. Matt, do you think that's all dead right now with maybe the strength of the Argonauts and the Alouettes this year?
Yeah, it's great to see where it usually happens only once a decade where a team from the West, and no offense to the esteemed people on this, but I don't want any of you from the West here. I don't want any of you here because it happens over and over again. And if the Ticats can beat the BC Lions, that pretty much kind of just ends it, I think, mathematically. So I think it's great for the league that there's more balance. And, it's just something we don't normally see, where it's always Calgary and Edmonton would be dominating, and then Winnipeg and the Lions were their years. And usually the West is where the better quarterbacks and the better defensive lines. That's usually seemed to be the constant theme. But yes, as for this year, Hamilton take care of business against a wounded BC Lions team, and then we have balance between the East and the West.
Jeff, do you believe in the balance, or do you think that, the West is the best?
Well, come on, guys. Let's be clear here. The West brings over a couple East coaches, and then they start acting like the East. I mean, this is the reality here. I wouldn't say this is the East improving. I'd say this is the West, falling off a cliff for a certain degree. I mean, look at the bottom of the West. How many people had the Edmonton Elks finishing not only atop the West, but winning the Grey Cup? They've been an absolute disaster. We shouldn't even waste our time talking about them as far as when it comes to standings. And then the BC Lions, their season's fallen faster than the credibility of the Elks this year. So, I mean, look at the fact that we have this not even a race at this point. So, I mean, the East is staying true, hovering around that 500, mark to make the playoffs and get in and whatever. And then the West has fallen off. So, I mean, I'm with Matt in the sense that, it is nice not to have a West team crossover, for once in a blue moon. But I mean, to me, I think it speaks more to the caliber of play and talent. It seems like everyone's kind of here. And then, you got a couple lower downs like the Elks and the Red Blacks, and then you got the Bombers. So we just got this very intriguing middle pack I don't know, it's gonna be fascinating, I think, come the playoffs, because as we know, as we've seen in the past, it doesn't really matter what you finish in the regular season. It's gonna matter.
And Hustler, I'm going to throw that to you. And you said the key word there, Jeff. It kind of like a middle meat party going on there. But doesn't that add to the fun there if you get this kind of strange parity amongst teams that anyone can beat anyone, even though the records may be at 500?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of intrigue going into these final weeks of the season and into the CFL playoffs. As far as the crossover goes, that ship has sailed. Big part of that has just been the Ottawa Red Blacks. I mean, they won 2 games against Edmonton. Other than that, I mean, they've lost every single game in the division. And when you're thinking about the crossover, you have to have a better record to make that happen. So for the last 2 weeks, it sort of seemed like unless there was a big resurgence from the Red Blacks costing one of the East teams a few victories, it probably was going to be the case. And yeah, I mean, the drop off of BC over the last month has been, sort of shocking. It seemed like they were really getting going. And to me, it goes back to the Bombers' destruction of them 30-3 in BC. And since then, they haven't looked to be the same team at all. And that's happened a few times this year with teams getting their asses kicked by Winnipeg. And it's taken a few weeks. Look at Saskatchewan after the Banjo Bowl and the Labor Day Classic. They, of course, won on the weekend, a huge win for them. But it really did set them back a little bit. So, right now, the East is as wide open as I can remember at any point in a long time. And as far as the West goes, I mean, we've really seen that middle pack of the West jockeying for second place, a home playoff game, and who was going to be the odd team out. And right now, it looks like it's the BC Lions.
Well, Jeff, this is what concerns me. And every week I seem to have a different opinion about the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who I pegged for first. I actually did in the beginning of the season. I thought they'd finish first in the West this year and maybe even tops in the league. The win over Montreal, I don't know, was it convincing? It seemed like once Trevor Harris came in there, it was a different ball game. And had it been another quarter, it looked like the Riders might have blown another one and kind of slipped closer back to 500. As a team that covers the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and you're kind of thinking, who are we going to face in this West Final? Is Saskatchewan the team, you think?
Yeah, Clint, a number of points I had the same feel. I thought the Roughriders are going to be one of those, one of the better teams for sure in this season. I think I'm with you in that. I don't know how many text messages I've sent to colleagues over this season being like, what exactly are the Roughriders? Are they good? Are they middling? I mean, they've mixed in with this season of drama, like Cody Fajardo apologizing for comments he made to his receivers. And it just feels like a lot's going on there right now. And you know what? I think it boils down to Fajardo. I think my curiousness around that team and why I'm not so confident in them is because I don't know if I believe in Cody Fajardo. I don't know if, I know he had an awesome season in 2019, but he is the leader of this team. I mean, I'm not saying he's not a talented guy, but it seems to, that this team goes with the way he plays. And he's had some good games. He's had some not so great games. He's finally got some weapons. I think Duke Williams is going to be a big piece to that puzzle here. I think teams are going to realize, the teams that were going after him, including the Bombers, are going to, certainly be regretting not putting the money for that guy. But at the end of the day, I'm not as confident in them as I thought we would be from what we saw. And maybe that part of that is because there is more tape on Cody Fajardo, right? I mean, he came out of the blocks pretty hot in replacing Zach Claris in 2019. And teams didn't really know what his deal was, and he rode that wave. And then, again, I'm not suggesting that the 2020 season loss was some hinder on him or anything, but I think there's more of a, more pressure on him this season than ever to be the guy. And, whether you want to point to a weaker O-line, then maybe they obviously had some issues early on in the season with those, crazy Achilles injuries. So they had knocks on their defense right away. AC Leonard got suspended. He's a massive piece of that defensive puzzle. For him to sit out those games with suspensions, that didn't help. Shaq Evans obviously being out for as long as he was out. I mean, they have dealt with things, and
they got stars.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. I mean, they have recognizable names. So I'll just, it's just a roundabout way of saying they've dealt with some things this season. They look like they're getting, all those pieces back. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But at this point, I feel like I have the same feeling I had in week one, where you just don't know what these guys are about.
I think that the one thing, my question with Cody is in 2019, it felt like he could be a guy that is the number one reason why a team is winning in the playoffs, that he could carry it. Now it feels like Saskatchewan could win it all because of the new weapons on offense, because of the defense, but it would be where Fajardo is more part of the puzzle, but he's not a guy individually that can lift up the rest of the team. So that kind of feels like the difference between Fajardo now and 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, listen.
Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just going to say, I mean, Saskatchewan had their big test against Winnipeg in back-to-back games, and they couldn't get in the end zone in 8 quarters. So, there are far more. I mean, I think when you compare them to everyone except the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, I think they might be as well-rounded a team. I mean, I think they've got some pieces on offense, defense, special teams that'll make them competitive against all those. But to the point about the quarterbacks, when it comes down to it, I got to tell you, I mean, I think I still ride with Bo Levi Mitchell in a head-to-head matchup against Cody Fajardo with everything on the line. And we've seen it, 3 head-to-head games between these two clubs when Calgary was really struggling. They got 2 of the 3, and I would be shocked if we saw anything other than a 4th matchup between these two teams to determine who's going to be here in Winnipeg on the 5th of December.
Big statement, Jeff. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, I think Saskatchewan's benefiting from a weak league. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at that group, I think they are better. I'm kind of with Andrew. I don't. You talk about like trying to figure out teams. What's Calgary's deal? You know what I mean? And I mean, they kind of predicted this a little bit. Obviously, like Payne, like. Dave Dickinson said it was going to take some time with the pieces they had, and it has played out that way. To his credit, it was a slow start. They, started to collect some wins. I think it's fascinating, the brothers dynamic, and that, Craig Dickinson until last game couldn't get that victory against his brother. But it's just, like, I don't know. Like, I just, maybe it's just the years we've seen Bo Levi Mitchell play. And I mean, I definitely thought in 2019, I'm not going to say he took a step back as far as like a player, but I saw a Bo Levi Mitchell in the playoffs who wasn't nearly as dominant because he didn't have the weapons around him. Now, I think he has better weapons. I think what I like about Calgary in that matchup is they're also seemingly getting better in special teams on defense. They have a good secondary. They're starting to improve. Their linebackers are good. They could probably improve a little bit on their, front push, but I also think Saskatchewan's dealing with the exact same issues. So they seem almost kind of like teams that mirror each other. And that's why, I forget what the exact point total is, but the combined totals, the margin I think is in favor of Calgary by like 4 points in those 3 games. So if that suggests anything, and if you look at the standings, it's clear this team's, this game, that West semifinal will likely be in Saskatchewan. It will just be fascinating to see which brother comes out on top in what's been a crazy season series between those clubs.
Well, what you basically suggested to me that the most entertaining game in the postseason this year in the CFL will be the West semifinal.
I think so. I mean, they're all fun. All CFL playoff games are fun, but that one seems to have a certain added juice to it, just given the whole
if you got to rank it, brother on brother. Also, I think we agree that Calgary and Saskatchewan are slightly better than the top teams in the East. So the Western one is going to be it would be the more interesting. And I'm saying that as someone who is right now in Toronto.
Okay, now we've kind of discussed the murky middle here. Let's go below the murky middle. I have to admit, I've been kind of following what's going on in Edmonton all week long. And our friend Terry Jones out there has been having a heyday ripping the Elks. But I needed to see it for myself. And watching the Tiger Cats, I'm going to say this honestly. I thought they played with the Elks for the most part. And the game actually score-wise looked closer than it really was. Because I feel like Jeremiah Masoli, if he kept on really trying, he could have put up about 50 on that team. I think I keep hearing the words, and sometimes I don't know what this means. Has the coach lost the room? But I'm hearing a lot of this and reading a lot that Jamie Elizondo has lost the room. But Jeff, has it gone beyond that? This team, we've all watched the CFL for many decades now. And to me, that's been the charter franchise of the CFL. And they don't look really good anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the leadership, whether you want to talk about GM Brock Sunderland and, his kind of like just some of the decisions he's, that organization has made as a whole, whether you want to talk about the COVID-19 vaccinations. I mean, the CFL is a fun league because everybody talks in the CFL. So you know what the problems are in these different teams. And whether it's a division over vaccinations and non-vaccinated players, or it's Jamie Elizondo, who I think at the end of the day is just handled some of his players are very sensitive to what coaches say. And if you don't lay the blame on yourself, I just feel like he reminds me of Trevor Harris in some of his post-game interviews where it's like, we need, he starts pointing fingers at certain directions, certain, areas of the team, and then wraps up the conversation by saying, I need to be better. You know what I mean? And like, there's certain ways of doing things that reflects on players negatively. And it's just been an absolute train wreck. And I agree with Terry Jones in the sense that you need to blow this thing up. Jamie Elizondo is not a good head coach. You know what I mean? So for me, like, this is a guy who, in my opinion, is another guy who got a head coaching job because of the favoritism he gets from the TSN panel. You could probably say the same thing about Paul LaPolice in Ottawa because he's a great offensive coordinator, but he's been questioned about his ability to motivate, and what we've seen from the Red Blacks has been trash. So it's no surprise that the two guys who've been propped up, by their colleagues are now drowning based on the fact that they weren't really those guys that were leaders in the locker room. That's what you need. And I'm not likening Paul LaPolice to Jamie Elizondo in the way they execute in their personalities and execution, but the fact remains that the best coaches in this league, the best organizations in this league have great leadership. They got leadership that where players, there's no division. There's players that want to play for their organizations. And I just don't think we're seeing any of that in Edmonton. You look at some of the moves too, like Trevor, like just the way they've handled even Trevor Harris. I mean, this is a guy who's in a matter of 2 weeks goes from your starter to no longer being qualified to, put on a jersey in the CFL. And now maybe that plays to the whole fact that he was traded, but it's just everything coming out of that, to all the on-field disaster, to the off-field, distractions. I don't know how you move forward with this group and somehow they're tarnishing their reputation. As you mentioned, Clint, they have that, title as like one of the banner franchises in the league. What players are going to want to go there after all the chaos we've seen in the last, X amount of months here with them? And so I'm with Terry in the sense that blow this thing up. This is, get new leadership, put the people in place that players are going to want to play for and fans are going to want to be, proud to have represent their club.
Hustler, you're percolating over there. I can see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, this is far more than a coach losing the room and having a pretty talented roster underachieve to an extent maybe we haven't seen in a long time in the Canadian Football League. It's far bigger than that. This organization has lost their fan base and lost the community. I mean, we could talk about the embarrassment on the field this year for the Elks, but I don't think there's anything just more chilling to people that love the Canadian Football League, that are concerned for the future of the league, than to see what Commonwealth Stadium looked like on the weekend in the second half of that game. I was talking to Dustin Nielsen, who called the game for TSN on the weekend, and I think they announced 22,000. There might have been 10 to 11 there earlier in the game. And in the second half, there might have been 3,000 or 4,000 people. And I mean, that's an embarrassment on a level that we haven't seen maybe ever for the Edmonton Elks. I mean, this has been a team that has always been supported well. They've always been competitive too. But I mean, this is far more than the coach or frankly, even the general manager. I mean, an entire overhaul and whatever they have to do to regain the trust and the opportunity to get some of these butts back in seats for next season, or we could be talking about a very different situation in Northern Alberta. And there's been problem spots in the Canadian Football League over the last few years, but it hasn't been there. And if you had Edmonton as another fire of the Canadian Football League, that's another thing that Randy Ambrosie certainly doesn't want to deal with and does not bode well for what's going forward for this league.
Matty?
Just the final thought here is I feel bad for some of the veterans on this team. You put in a rookie quarterback late, that kind of sends a message of we're not trying to win. Then you see a tiny crowd, and these football players are also people. You see that's going to hurt as well. And Edmonton, they are such a disappointing team. I remember before the beginning of the year, we thought this was going to be this fun, up and down, high offense, high octane team. And we've seen none of it, and now we're learning about a rookie named Cornelius. I mean, this, you know, we could talk, like, we knew Ottawa was going to be bad. We knew Ottawa was going to be bad. We did not know this was going to be the case for Edmonton, and I guess we saw it early on when Ottawa would beat them, and, you know, Trevor Harris would have a lousy game against them. But I also remember Edmonton, where they you know, their downfield passing attack was working, and they beat Calgary, and it looked like, wait a minute, maybe Edmonton, I think it was the Labor Day game. It's like, okay, Edmonton, okay, they're getting it together. Then a Harris shoulder injury, and now we're here. It's really sad.
Let's go to the Tiger Cats right now. Simoni Lawrence, I think when it's all said and done, he will pass Rob Hitchcock. He already just passed his head coach, Orlando Steinauer, in terms of all-time tackles. You know, he's a multiple all-star player, a guy that gets down and dirty. And Matt, I'll stay with you on this one here. Is Simoni Lawrence, the linebacker of the Tiger Cats, you're already smiling, is he a Hall of Famer?
Yes. Could I have said that faster? If I could have said yes faster, I would have. I mean, just so many big plays from this guy. And you mentioned the 4 All-Stars and Beast in 2019. And by the way, having the record for the most tackles in a game is a dubious stat, because often it says your defensive line ain't doing their job. But, you know, he's got that, and just so entertaining. I know that is no bearing to getting the Hall of Fame. And listen, he's going to rub some people the wrong way. The Caleros hit, there might be some writers that want to punish him for it. But at the end of the day, an incredibly productive player, lots of big plays, been one of the key members of the Ticats defense that's had many, many good years since he got over there. Absolutely, Simoni is in my mind, first ballot Hall of Famer, because if I say anything else than that, I'm afraid what he might do to me. So yes, first ballot.
Andrew, what do you think?
I'm not there with Matt. I mean, he's been the outstanding nominee for the defensive player once. He's been a CFL All-Star once or twice, excuse me. Listen, he is famous. I mean, if we're talking about Hall of Fame, he's famous, but he's famous for a few things: cheap shots, dirty hits, and his mouth. The guy's a great player. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, there is a level when it comes to being a Hall of Famer that I'm not saying it won't happen. You know, it would have helped for him and his team to show up in the Grey Cup last year and actually get it done after getting to the big game a few times and falling short. So I'm not going to write it off, but if we're talking about right now, I'm certainly not with Cauz putting him into the Hall right now.
Put him in. Careful, he's going to find you on Twitter, and I would say that Grey Cup loss was more about the offensive line than Willie Jefferson.
Hey Matt, are you safe right now? Is he's not behind you there? Is he?
Yeah.
You're not in a separate room right now. Is he? I mean, I'm kind of in between. I say I have a more of a let's wait and see approach. I would lean more towards no, because I feel like we're faced with recency bias right now, where he's played well recently. You know what I mean? He was great in 2019. He's been great this year. He's arguably, well, I think there's a couple of guys on Winnipeg that would make a case for being one of the best, defensive players in the league right now. But Simoni Lawrence is certainly there. But when you think of Hall of Fame, you think of guys that get in, particularly first ballot Hall of Famers, they take over games and they dominate for years and years. And I'm not 100% sure Simoni Lawrence falls into that category. You need to be a perennial all-star. You need to be a guy that is constantly talked about. And in this case, again, I'm not saying Simoni Lawrence doesn't get the respect, in the papers and on the airwaves and on TV and whatnot. But, I think he counters that with who he is too. And I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad dude, but he's had instances over his career, whether it be cheap shots, and more than one, right? I mean, or more than a couple. Yeah. And so,
I felt sorry for him this week. James Wilder went after him.
Right. And I mean, and the reality too is that, he's a Hall of Fame is based on conduct, mostly on the field, but we know that some of the stuff off the field can be an issue too. But, again, I'm not ruling him out. I'm saying this guy's a terrific player. And I just think he needs to do it a bit longer and, ask this question in a couple of years if he continues the pace that he's at. And I think it's a slam dunk, and I'm up there with Matt as well.
I would say, Simoni's a great guy in the community, right? First of all, he's a great guy in the community and I think a real Hamilton hero guy. And I think when I think of these names like Rocky DiPietro and just some of these famous, Ben Zambiazzi and Rob Hitchcock and Coach Orlando Steinauer and the fact that he's up there and probably going to have more stats than these guys when it's all said and done, because he looks like, I think he's going into his 30s. He's in his 30s right now, and the guy's still got a pretty good motor, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's been productive. I think a couple CFL All-Stars, 4 Eastern All-Star time there. I think, there's no reason why he's not going to have a bunch more productive years. Hamilton's a good organization. They got a chance of winning a Grey Cup in the next couple of years, maybe even this year if certain things bounce their way. But and then I think that might elevate Simoni Lawrence.
Yeah, listen, the guy's a Ticat Hall of Famer for sure right now, but I guess my point is there's still a lot of road left for Simoni Lawrence, and if he continues to play at an elite level and is a difference maker for a few more seasons, I imagine it'll probably be an easier sell.
The word is elite level coming from you, Hustler. I'm going to come at you right at with this one here. This has been a conversation that keeps coming up in not only just Hamilton, but across the CFL, even before the season started, about the battle at quarterback between Jeremiah Masoli and Dane Evans. Dane went down. A third string quarterback, David Watford, came in. Jeremiah got healthy from getting beaten up in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan in week 1 and 2. And right now he has put together 2 outstanding games, 300-yard passing games. His statistics are fantastic. In fact, he looks like the 2018 MOP candidate. Is he the guy once and for all to be the starting quarterback of the Hamilton Tiger Cats? Andrew, you.
Went right back to you, Huss. Do the math. Yes.
Back to me. Yes. I'm in on Masoli. And I had him in DraftKings this weekend. They're very solid. So you're picking me.
Nice job.
Backing Masoli. But you nailed it. I mean, he was so good in 2018. I think we thought we were seeing a guy that was going to be a star in this league for a while. And to be honest, from afar, it was very interesting to see the way the Ticats have gone back and forth, what Evans was able to do at times, but dealing with the injuries to Jeremiah Masoli. But I think all things being equal, if Jeremiah Masoli is close to 100%, I think he's the best quarterback in that dressing room. I think he gives them the best chance to win. And I think right now, as you just mentioned, Clint, we're seeing Masoli get more comfortable with his situation right now, feel better about it, and it's showing its results on the field. So if I'm Orlando Steinhauer, I'm riding with Jeremiah Masoli. Although, it's a great spot to be in, and one that a lot of other Canadian Football League teams don't have, including here in Winnipeg, with a pretty excellent second option if things aren't going well or if someone gets up. But if you're asking me who I'm tabbing to start the rest of the year, it's definitely Masoli.
Yeah, it's Masoli. The cynic, if you wanted to push back, you would say a lot of those numbers recently come against bad teams. The other side is when you put up numbers that dominant against Edmonton, it should not be ignored. My only concern with Masoli was week 1, where he had that one touchdown to Ackland and then didn't do anything after that. But I do agree, it is Masoli. It should be Masoli. And what should be exciting is, I know he didn't play, I think, late in the second half of the third quarter when Brandon Banks went out. But imagine how good Hamilton can be if Brandon Banks comes back healthy, if Addison can be back for the playoffs. And also, you saw Masoli, I think it was on that first touchdown. I mean, he threw that in such a tight window. I mean, that's a great throw no matter who the defender is on what team. So, yeah, I think if you're Hamilton, you have to be pretty excited about Masoli.
I think Masoli's the guy. I feel like Masoli has been one of my favorite players in this league for some time. I think you look at the 2019 season, if he doesn't get injured, what does that mean for the Hamilton Tiger Cats and winning the Grey Cup? I mean, Dane Evans, all the credit to him. He came in a tough situation and he led what was a very good Ticats team down the stretch and in relief. I don't want to use the word exposed because it's not fair, because Dane Evans is a good player, but the Grey Cup was convincing. And I on Winnipeg's side, and I just felt like, really from the start, Dane Evans didn't have what it took to, take that team to the next level. And I don't think it's a confidence thing. I think, he's certainly a confident guy. If you see him, whether it's through his play or the way he conducts himself off the field, there's confidence there for sure. I think the players certainly have confidence in him. And I think Hamilton has a great situation in their quarterbacks. The fact that we're even debating between 2 guys and who should be the starter or who's the guy that, is the guy moving forward, bodes well for them. I think with Jeremiah Masoli, though, what I like about him is he brings a much needed calmness to the pocket, calmness to the huddle. He's a guy who I think, players look at him, he's laid back, he's chill, and he just brings kind of this level of calm that I think maybe you need in some of those chaotic situations during a game. We all know his skill. This guy is coming off a knee injury from 2019. I know it's a couple of years later. It's not like it's the next season, but that's going to have its effects. You need, early in this, it's one thing to work out in the gym and do all these things and try to replicate these live reps and practice situation. It's a whole other thing when, you're when a big part of your game is your fancy footwork. I mean, that's one of the things that this guy's so impressive with, is his ability to, pivot and switch around, and I think that might've been maybe some of his early challenges, obviously dealing with more injuries this year. We finally get to see Jeremiah Masoli, the healthy version, whether it's against Edmonton or Ottawa. I know we like to discredit that. I know I've done that in the past with those performances, but it's certainly a good sign. And I think with Jeremiah Masoli looking like the player we've seen him before, it bodes well for Hamilton, who I think a lot of people expect coming out of the East, and giving what looks like, the Bombers a good run here down the stretch.
Well, let me stick with this. I mean, we got two Winnipeg guys here, so I have to ask you a question here. And as we get into this interesting part of the season, as everyone are playing games that mean something pretty much here, with the exception of Edmonton and Ottawa. But all these teams that we talked about in the early going that are kind of in the middle, they're all fighting and jockeying for position. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers have long clinched a playoff spot. Hustler, is there any chance that this team gets bored going into the postseason, setting them up for some kind of dangerous situation in the West Final?
Well, it's hard to say no to that, because, they've essentially accomplished what they set out to do at the beginning of the season. We've still got a month left in the year. There's 3 more games. I am fascinated as to how Mike O'Shea, handles his roster going forward. Again, realistically, what's the most important thing? Being as healthy as possible and ready to go on the 5th of December. But I don't believe we're going to see mass shutdowns and just sort of mailing in these final few games. But it's a fair question, Clint. We had Willie Jefferson on the show last week, and I kind of asked him about this, and he said, hey, you know what? This is still a motivated group. They realize how good they've been. They want to continue putting up some special numbers. Establishing this defense is one of the great defenses in Canadian history. They're guys that are going for personal numbers. Willie'd love to lead the league in sacks. So I do think that, we'll see the Bombers be the Bombers, but, the fact of the matter is there's nothing that they're playing for other than getting ready to see who's coming to Winnipeg on the 5th of December. So I think the jury will be out, but it's a good problem to have, I think, for them, because, of course, they got 10 wins in the bank. They've got that home playoff game, and, their MO is going to be to win football games and continue to play at a certain level. Winnipeg is still haunted by 2001. If you recall, the Bombers were this incredible team. They shut it down for the last couple weeks of the season. They had a bye at the end. They had a bye for the first week, and then they ended up losing to an 8-10 Calgary team that they allowed into the playoffs by resting all their guys in the final game of the regular season. So, wait a minute. Ghost of
2001. Winnipeg won it in 2019. Hamilton's got the ghosts, but the one point you brought up is the next important game for Winnipeg, is it in more than a month from now? You mentioned December 5th.
Yes.
That is an intriguing situation for the coaching staff about give them reps, keep them motivated, but woo. Yeah, no, guys, it's a month before this can be a game that matters for that team.
All right, so here I'll lay down what the situation is. This whole talk about nothing to play for, next biggest game, yada yada yada. That's a reality that lives outside that locker room. Those guys are going to stay excruciatingly, annoyingly consistent to this whole 1 week at a time. The focus within that team is built on Mike O'Shea. Trust me, I'm there every single day. The Q&As are excruciating in some instances because it's so consistent in their message, in their delivery. This team is so motivated. They have the Mike O'Shea Kool-Aid drunk. There is no jury out. There is no situation where the next meaningful thing is this team is locked and loaded. It's just painful sometimes.
But hold on, Jeff.
The way that you want them to do it. But let me finish this. The reality is I'm with Hassan and Matt too as well. It's going to be fascinating because how do you work this out? Because regardless of, there's a precedent that is set with Mike O'Shea. He's the guy that leaves Zach Collaros in with 30 seconds left or 90 seconds left in the game when you're up by 20 points. He's the guy that is sending Andrew Harris to punish the Rock when they're up by 3 touchdowns, risking injury. So you want, like, he has this mindset that these guys, like, he never thinks of those things like injuries and stuff, but he's never been put in this kind of situation where he has multiple games. And to Andrew's point about Calgary, I thought that would be a fascinating factor until now. It kind of looks like Saskatchewan's going to steal that second place. I think with the Bombers, I figured that they might, if they were to rest a game, for instance, it would be the second last game of the regular season, play the final game of the regular season against a Calgary team that may or may not be fighting for that home playoff game, because I think that the Bombers, they'll never admit it, but I think they're more concerned about Calgary than they are about Saskatchewan.
I dare you. I dare you to ask Coach Shea which team he's more afraid of, or just ask him straight out. I ask him straight out. Hey, Coach, with nothing being meaningful in the next month, what's your focus?
Hey, so he would have interrupted you right there, Matt. Prime example. He would have heard nothing meaningful, would have ignored the entire rest of your question, and then would have went in and said, "We don't think that way. Our guys don't think that way." He is constantly picking up on singular words because he knows the players listen to this stuff. He is constantly preaching his message of staying on the same page.
Then hold up a giant laminate of the standings and go, no, Coach, look, I'm looking right here. You see this? Here's you. Here's everyone else. And here's a month in between. See what happens then.
He claims he didn't know that the last victory would clinch the West Final. You know what I mean? Like he didn't. He claimed the week before. He claimed the week before that he didn't think that would punch his tickets to the playoffs with a victory. He refuses to acknowledge in perfect reference, Matt, the things that are staring him right in the face. And it's because of this mentality the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have. And it's exactly why they've been as consistent as they have been this season.
But hold on, though. You've said, all you guys said the same word at some point, the word injuries. Like you've already lost Andrew Harris. Like he's gone for the rest of the season. Like he probably back for the postseason. But what if Brady Oliveira goes down? What if one of their fine offensive linemen goes down? What if Jefferson or Jeffcoat goes down? Like, can you continue to play these guys 60 minutes for games that are relatively meaningless?
There's an argument to be made that you shouldn't, but from Mike O'Shea's perspective, at least in the short term, I don't think we're going to see anything other than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers go out and do what they've done to the rest of the Canadian Football League. And that will include all of their studs, all of their all-stars in the lineup. And maybe to Jeff's point, maybe they'll take the foot off the gas a little bit in the second half and maybe pull a few of those guys in the lineup, because it hasn't happened so far. Because it would be a tragedy to have a serious injury to one of those players in a game that doesn't matter much. Well, Zach Collaros, don't even talk about that. That is the one thing. I mean, outside from all those players, the Bombers aren't winning a Grey Cup if Sean McGuire is the starting quarterback. I don't believe that to be the case, unless you can just shut teams out and win it all on defense. And who knows, maybe this Bomber team can. But listen, having a healthy Zach Collaros, to me, job number one. But Jeff, to your point, I mean, I don't think they're going to deviate from what has got them here to this point. And it might be risky in some people's minds, but Mike O'Shea doesn't want to change anything about this club. They want to keep doing what they're doing it through the rest of the regular season, and then try and win 2 playoff games and keep this Grey Cup in Winnipeg.
And Clint, even to your point about like, what if this guy goes down? What if this guy goes down? What if this guy goes down? There's pretty much an answer to all those questions for the most part, besides Zach Collaros, right? I mean, if he goes out, they're in big trouble. I mean, Sean McGuire is a good guy. I think he leads the league in touchdowns still, as he keeps punching them in from the 1 yard line.
Stop it. He's not winning the Grey Cup.
Yeah. So he's obviously an all-star. He'll be a player's all-star for sure. But no, but you look at this team, I just, you constantly hear Mike O'Shea when we say things like we're saying now, or, we say things that are certainly more media driven and we're trying to get information or get comment. He constantly says things like, well, I don't think that way. I don't think that way. And the reality is he doesn't think that way. He thinks a completely different way, and he will continue that. But, Brady Oliveira, like, I think is an interesting one too, is they're going to probably rest Andrew Harris for a good chunk of the season. They saw what he was able to do in his first game back after injuring himself in training camp and missing all those games. He came and he was, not quite the Andrew Harris that we've necessarily been, expecting from 2019, but he was able to perform. So that's a priority. That gives Brady Oliveira a good, potential, a good chunk of the next reps here in the next games. And so he's going to get better. They've had injuries in linebackers. Their secondary was a question mark. And now there's some guys like DeAndre Alford who look like all-stars. You see guys like they just signed Winston Rose. He came in and he adds to a secondary that's given up 3 passing touchdowns all season long. There is no guy that needs to come out of the lineup right now. But there's guys that you can certainly put in, factor in another position, and they finally address their kicking situation. Imagine this, having a up and down ridiculous kicking situation where you couldn't guarantee anything beyond 40 something yards and never having to get into a situation where it killed you. I just to me, it's one of those things that they have the depth. There's guys that are chomping at the bit, and that all speaks to their culture. And that's why Mike O'Shea deserves a ton of credit here, that it doesn't matter if you're Zach Collaros leading the pack, leading the team, or Willie Jefferson leading the group on defense, or the guy who's holding the clipboard, or the guy on the bottom end of the practice roster who doesn't have a chance of playing. Every single guy has bought in, and I'm not 100% sure I've seen that in any professional sports team in any league.
Matt, final word to you.
My final word was I said that Winnipeg is the exact opposite of Edmonton. Here and there, about one team with complete buy-in, one team without. But go Hamilton this week. Beat the Lions.
Guys, that's fantastic. Hey, that's a wrap for this week's edition of the CFL This Week. A certain quick thank to our panelists, Matt Cauz, TSN 1050, Andrew the Hustler Harrison from, of course, Winnipeg Sports Daily, Jeff Hamilton from Winnipeg Sports Daily. I'd like to actually change that, the Winnipeg Free Press. Of course, follow them on Twitter and all their socials, and certainly absorb all their Canadian Football League talk. And folks, we will return with more juicy topics. And of course, some of the most knowledgeable from the CFL. You can catch us every Monday with fresh content on ticats.ca, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And if you're listening or watching on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. Hey, from the Tiger Cats Audio Network, I'm Bubba O-Neil. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Of course, you, the listener. See you next week. And of course, Oski Wee.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O-Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.